I never thought I would write these words, and I certainly didn't think it would begin with a funeral. My father passed away after 8 months of relentless battle with pancreatic cancer. It's a silent, brutal disease that tore through his body without giving him or any of us a chance to prepare. He was 63, far too young to say goodbye. We held his funeral on a gloomy Saturday morning at Oak Ridge Memorial Funeral Home. The sky was overcast, clouds covering every inch of the sky, as if nature itself was bowing down to pay tribute to a quiet but strong man. I stood beside my father's casket, wearing the black suit he once complimented me on when I wore it to my college graduation party. My hand gripped an old family photo I had found in a dusty box in the attic, a box where my father kept his most cherished items, from a cracked wristwatch to my old birthday cards from elementary school. Every memento, a silent testament to a father who loved not with words but with actions. The funeral wasn't large, about 40 people, family. A few of my father's old friends, former co-workers, neighbors, and some relatives. Among them were two men I called uncles, Thomas and Beckett, my father's younger brothers. They arrived late, dressed neatly, embraced me tightly, and nodded as if they were truly sharing in the grief I once believed they were genuinely heartbroken. After the main ceremony, when everyone had left the room, I asked for a few minutes to stay behind. Not to cry, my tears had already dried up after 8 months of watching my father slowly fade away, but to feel the emptiness. It wasn't the same as sadness. It wasn't anger. It felt like an ever-expanding void in my chest, pulling me in with no way out. I wandered into a small room off to the side of the funeral home, an area with a few armchairs and dim lighting designed for people who needed a private space to breathe. I sat down, closed my eyes. A minute of silence or so, I thought, but then the door opened. I didn't react at first, thinking it was a staff member, until I heard the voice of Uncle Thomas. He looks at me like I'm his enemy. It's pathetic. The fool doesn't even know we changed the will last month. I froze. My eyes widened. Everything's ours now. The house, the company, everything. Wait until Bill reads this new will. I want to see Walter's face, Beckett. The other uncle laughed lightly, soft like a breeze, but enough to freeze my heart. I wanted to stand up. I wanted to march out and scream at them. But my legs felt rooted to the floor. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. I could only listen, each word a dagger to my chest. We made him sign it while he was on painkillers. Thomas, you've outdone yourself. Who can refuse when they're high on meds like that? Yeah. And I told Maureen she wouldn't be needed after this week. No point in keeping the maid when everything's ours now, Maureen. The woman who had cared for my father throughout his battle with chemotherapy, the one who helped me bathe him, change his sheets, and watch over his sleep every night, and I grip on the armrest so hard my knuckles turned white. Not from the cold, but from the fury. I had once believed they were family. I had believed too much. When they left the room, I stayed seated another 10, 15 minutes just to keep myself from exploding. My father had once told me, you never strike unless you know how the fight will end. And I remembered that. I remembered it clearly. So I did nothing. Not because I was weak, but because I was waiting for the right moment. I left the funeral home like a shadow. I accepted condolences like a machine. In my head, only one thought echoed. They think they've won. We're not done yet. I can't remember the last time I had a full night's sleep. Maybe it was before my dad was hospitalized for the last time. Since he passed, time has felt warped. I can't even tell the difference between night and day anymore. Just a blur of sleepless moments and jarring memories flooding back. And this morning when the sunlight peeked through the living room curtains, what woke me up wasn't the sound of birds or the early morning light. It was the phone ringing loudly nonstop. 26 missed calls, all from my uncles, their wives, and a few cousins. The messages were endless. They all said pretty much the same thing. Call me back now. We need to talk. It's urgent. This is family business. Don't blow this out of proportion. One message from Uncle Thomas after I had ignored all their calls since yesterday, Walter. If you don't stop acting childish and call back. Right now, you'll have consequences you can't even imagine. The words were threatening, pompous, and laced with a sense of panic. But what stopped me, what made me pause, was realizing this. If they're panicking like this, it means they know something's starting to crack in their plan. And that's when I realized the first strike had already been made by my dad. From where he now rests, I didn't answer any of the calls. Instead, I texted Diego, my best friend since high school, the only person I trusted in this chaos. Diego wasn't just a dependable friend. He had also worked in the legal field enough to know what I needed to do next without screwing everything up. About an hour later, Diego showed up with a hot coffee and a look that was both worried and serious. I told him everything from the secret conversation I overheard at the funeral home to my dad's journal, Morin's whispered words, and the mysterious presence of a safety deposit box. I'd never known about Diego didn't say much. He just took notes on his phone for details about the timing, names, and anything else that might be used as evidence. When I finished telling the story, Diego looked up and asked a simple question. Did your dad have a regular nurse? I froze, yeah, right. Kendra. She took care of him during the last 2 months. A young girl. Red hair, always played some soft jazz music on her phone while she worked. Do you still have her number? Diego asked. I nodded, pulled out my phone, and called. After a few rings, a tired-sounding woman's voice answered. I introduced myself and asked if she remembered any details about my uncles visiting my dad during the last weeks. There was a slight pause on the other end. Then Kendra took a deep breath as if recalling something uncomfortable. Well, actually, there was one time I passed by Mr. George's room and saw Thomas holding his hand while he signed a stack of papers. He couldn't speak. His face was pale from the painkillers, and he could barely open his eyes. Beckett was standing guard at the door, and there was another man I didn't recognize. They told me to leave because it was family business. Diego shot me a meaningful look. I thanked Kendra and promised I'd reach out again if I needed more details. We sat in my dad's office for a few more minutes before I remembered the thick envelope I found in The Old Man and the Sea. Yesterday, my dad's favorite book. I took it out, placed it on the table, and opened it slowly, as if afraid it might trigger some kind of trap. Inside was a black leather notebook. The pages were slightly yellowed, and my dad's handwriting strong. Steady was still clear. Each entry was a piece of his memory from the past year. His chemotherapy days, his emotions, his thoughts, and the visits from Thomas and Beckett. He'd noted the dates of the content of their conversations and what sent chills down my spine. He described his fear of being manipulated, how they always came when I wasn't there, always bringing papers and talking in vague terms about protecting the family legacy. One entry from exactly 2 months ago read, "If Walter finds this notebook, tell him there's a safe box at First National Bank. Morin has the key, and that he must fight to keep what's his." I closed the notebook just as Diego looked at me and asked, "What are you going to do now?" I didn't respond right away. Instead, I stood up and walked straight to my dad's room. Morin was sitting folding towels, her eyes swollen from crying. I gently asked Morin, "Did my dad ever give you anything important? A key, some documents?" She looked at me as if something in her memory had just been triggered. Without saying a word, she walked to my dad's nightstand, pulled out a small envelope. Inside was a bank key and a handwritten note. "Give only to Walter." I looked at Diego. He nodded. "Let's go." Just as I was about to leave, my phone rang again. It was Thomas calling. "You better come to my place right now. We need to talk. No one wants this to go to court. You understand?" I looked at Diego, hit the record button, and switched to speakerphone. "I think we should meet at my dad's house." In an hour, there was a long pause. Then Thomas responded, his voice tight. "All right, meeting at your dad's house works too." When the call ended, I turned to Diego. "They know we have something, they just don't know what yet." Diego smiled, "And we'll let them figure it out on their own." I looked at the bank key in my hand, feeling like I was holding on to a piece of my dad that was still left, a part that hadn't been taken away, a part I was determined to protect to the end. I never thought I'd spend a Sunday like that sitting in my dad's living room, waiting for 2 men I used to call uncle to arrive while holding a bank key in one hand, a diary filled with secrets in the other, and a recorded phone call safely stored in Diego's phone. The scattered pieces of my dad's life slowly came together, forming a picture so clear it was almost haunting. He had known. Not just suspected, but knew for sure that they would betray him. And instead of sitting idly by, he had quietly laid out a plan for a final battle that he wouldn't live to see, but one that would fall to me to finish 15 minutes before my uncles arrived. I sat in the kitchen with Diego. Morin was beside us quietly pouring tea. Her hands still trembled, but her eyes had changed, no longer the fearful gaze of a servant who'd just been fired, but the look of a witness. "I worked for your father for 15 years, she said, her eyes drifting to the backyard. "I've never seen him worried about anything as much as he was about you." Diego looked at me, a light smile playing on his face. "Seems like he knew you wouldn't back down." I nodded, though I wasn't entirely sure. All I knew was that today I needed to keep my cool. I couldn't lose my temper. I couldn't let my emotions lead the way. I had to make them believe they were still in control so I could watch them walk right into their own trap. The doorbell rang. Morin stood up to answer. Thomas and Beckett walked in, looking like they had just come from a business conference. Sharp suits, ties, eyes scanning the room like they were reassessing the newly acquired assets. Beckett avoided making eye contact with me, while Thomas, on the other hand, smiled as if we had only had a minor misunderstanding at the funeral. "Walter," he said, shaking my hand a little too firmly. "You look better." I simply nodded. "Please sit down. We've got a lot to talk about." We sat at the old family dining table, the same table where my dad used to read the newspaper every Sunday morning, now serving as a negotiation table for an inheritance deal full of hidden agendas. Diego sat behind me, saying nothing, placing his phone on the table like a silent assistant. Thomas began, his tone laced with implication. "You know, your father's will is complicated, especially when the deceased changes things at the last minute. But you and Beckett said that my dad was fully aware when he signed that will, right?" I asked, trying to keep my tone calm. Beckett took a sip of water. "Of course, there were witnesses. Don't worry, everything's legal." "Good." I nodded. "Because it'd be quite strange if you had him sign it while he was on painkillers, wouldn't it?" A brief silence passed short, but enough for me to notice Thomas's eyes narrow. "Walter," he said, his voice no longer soft, "you're reading too much into this. I'm just speculating." I shrugged. "After all, my dad seemed to have written quite a bit down, like how you two always came by when I wasn't home, or how Beckett brought a stranger as a witness." Beckett's face went pale. Thomas raised an eyebrow. "The journal," I said. "My dad kept a handwritten journal day by day right up until he started using heavy morphine." Thomas chuckled dismissively. "Who would believe a journal written while sick?" "I thought the same," I nodded, "until I found the original will in the bank's safe deposit box, along with a video testimony, dated with real witnesses and legal verification." At this point, no one was laughing, no one was drinking water. Thomas tried to counter. "You're talking about an illegal document. Walter, you're violating privacy and could be sued for discovering that my father was manipulated and signed papers when he wasn't fully aware." I interrupted. "I have a witness, the in-home nurse. I also have security footage from the cameras my father installed. They clearly caught it, Thomas holding my dad's hand to sign Beckett standing guard. And the person who witnessed it never confirmed that my dad truly understood what he was signing." The room fell silent. The only sound was the ticking of the clock on the wall. "I'll let my father's lawyer present all of this at the will reading on Monday," I said. "But today, I'm just giving you the chance to stop before this becomes a lawsuit." "You can't stop." Thomas gripped the table. "You think you can threaten anyone here?" I stood up. Diego stood as well. "I'm not threatening. I'm informing you. Laughed by my father's coffin, thinking you won. But my father wasn't a fool, and neither am I." I placed a USB drive containing a copy of the security footage on the table. "Take this, watch it tonight. See what you've done. Then tomorrow go to the lawyer's office with whatever shred of decency you have left." I didn't wait for a response. I turned and walked out into the backyard. For the first time, I felt like I wasn't backed into a corner anymore. Inside, Thomas was yelling. Beckett remained silent. But I didn't need to hear more, because from now on, everything I needed was in my hands, without me having to chase them. Thomas and Beckett stood up. No one said another word. They left the house like two defeated shadows. When the door shut behind them, I leaned against it and exhaled. Diego stepped out of the kitchen, smirking. "Well," said boss, "I think they're about to puke." I didn't laugh. I felt exhausted. But deep inside, there was a fire igniting. One battle had ended, but the bigger war would begin tomorrow. On Monday morning, I woke up earlier than usual. The air was still misty, and the first rays of sunlight had just begun to filter through the living room curtains. The house was unnervingly quiet, but inside me, every cell was on fire. Today would be the defining day. The day I'd opened my father's safe deposit box at First National Bank, the one he had mentioned in his final journal entry as the key to keeping the truth safe. I had a quick breakfast of bread and a cold cup of coffee, my mind unable to focus on anything but the scrawled words in the leather notebook. "Walter, trust only yourself. The key is your father's last trust." Diego arrived right on time, carrying his laptop and 2 copies of the recording from our conversation with my uncles last Saturday. He didn't say much, just gave me a determined look and asked, "You ready?" I nodded, clutching the bank key in my coat pocket, and we drove straight to the bank. On the way, I couldn't shake the worst-case scenario from my mind. What if there's nothing in the safe? Or worse, what if the evidence I think I have isn't enough? But something inside me, for reasons I couldn't explain, still believed in my father. He wasn't the type of man to let things slip away easily. The First National Bank, a stately gray stone building at the corner of the downtown block, exuded both solemnity and coldness. The receptionist checked our IDs, the key, and verified everything before leading us downstairs to the vault room in the basement. The narrow hallway, thick stone walls, and the faint smell of mildew hinted at the weight of time and age. The massive iron doors lined up in rows like a steel maze, each safe a separate story, and today I was about to read my father's. The safe was medium-sized with a code and my father's name engraved on the front. When it opened, the sharp click sounded almost like the snap of fate. Inside, there wasn't much. A thick brown envelope, a black USB drive, and a small wooden box. I picked up the envelope first. On the outside, it simply read, "To William Chen, attorney sealed. To be opened only in the presence of Walter." The USB was wrapped in a protective plastic covering with a note attached, security footage from home, starting from March. Finally, there was the wooden box. I lifted the lid. Inside was a simple silver necklace with a gear-shaped pendant, the same necklace I'd seen my father wear during the early years of high school. At the bottom of the box, there was a small note. "Walter, if you're reading this, it means you've come to the right place. Don't let them take what isn't theirs." We left the bank with the three fateful items in hand. Our next stop was the office of William Chen, a longtime family friend, and the man my father had entrusted with his final confidences. William was an elderly Asian man, his white hair and glasses hanging loosely on his nose. Though small in stature, his sharp eyes were as keen as a razor. When I handed him the sealed envelope, he nodded, letting out a soft sigh, as if he had been waiting for this day for a long time. "I understand," he said. "We'll need to call everyone in. Read the will formally and publicly. But first I need to go over everything." We sat together in a small conference room where William opened the envelope, reviewed the documents, and then played the USB. The footage showed my father's living room, the camera angle coming from the ceiling behind the bookshelf. My father, frail in appearance, sat in an armchair, though his eyes still retained their sharpness. Then the footage shifted to show Uncle Thomas and Beckett walking in carrying a stack of documents. Unaware of the camera, they laughed and joked, suggesting my father sign a financial power of attorney update. In the video, Uncle Thomas flipped to the last page, guiding my father's hand to the pen, almost leading each shaky stroke. Beckett distractedly stood guard by the door. A third man, standing off to the side, took photos with his phone. William furrowed his brow. "If this is the day they claim your father updated the will one last time, then this video completely nullifies that will, because this is clear evidence of coercion." We continued watching the video. The second clip was a formal recording of my father on the day he actually signed the real will. My father looked into the camera, speaking slowly and clearly, confirming his alertness, confirming his wishes. He stated that all his assets, including the company and the house, would go to me. Thomas and Beckett would receive only nominal inheritances. Morin would be provided for with lifelong financial support. As a thank you, and Kendra, the young nurse, would have her tuition paid until she graduated. William stopped the video. "You have proof enough to invalidate any other will. I'll send out notices this afternoon to the entire family requesting their presence tomorrow morning for the official reading." That evening, I sat alone in my father's office, reading and rereading every entry in his journal. The handwriting was shaky, but the message was clear and detailed. Each page revealed a hidden corner of the story. Not only had my father anticipated the betrayal from my uncles, but he had also mentally prepared for battle in his own way. He knew his time was short, but he had used his final days to secure my future. Now it was my turn to finish what he started. Tomorrow I would face Thomas and Beckett, armed with the video. The proof, the letter, and the full truth. They thought they had won, but my father had outplayed them. Not just once, but the whole game. The next morning I arrived at William's office well before 3 p.m. The conference room felt heavy, almost suffocating. The sunlight streamed through the large window behind Bill's desk, casting long streaks of light across the carpet. I quietly took my seat at the head of the table. To my right was Diego, as solid as a rock. To my left was Moren, the woman who had been loyal to my father until the very end. Aurora was also present, her eyes glued to the door, waiting to see what would happen next. The door swung open. Thomas and Beckett walked in, accompanied by their wives and two of my cousins, the same ones who had looked at me with pity during the funeral. Now they regarded me with an unsettling, almost wary glance. There was something about my demeanor today that seemed to make them uneasy. Maybe it was my calmness, or perhaps it was the way my gaze no longer avoided theirs. Attorney Chen didn't say much. After a few brief introductions, he placed two thick stacks of documents on the table. "There are two wills," he said, his tone calm but firm. "One was signed 3 weeks before Mr. George passed away, as you are all aware. And the other one, clearly dated 6 months earlier, includes a video testimony, along with a series of pieces of evidence, showing that he was fully lucid when he signed." The air immediately thickened. I noticed Thomas's throat twitch. Beckett, usually so silent and seemingly aloof now, had his head down, eyes fixed on the table. I didn't take my eyes off them. This was the moment my father and I had been waiting for. Chen played the video. My father appeared frail and tired, yet his eyes remained sharp. He read each line, each sentence of the will clearly. He said my name, Walter, and declared that all of his major shares in the company, the house, and all of his real estate assets would go to me. Thomas and Beckett would receive a portion just as their father had allocated for them. Maureen was insured a lifelong pension and the right to stay in the guest house if she wished. Kendra, the young nurse, would have her tuition paid in full until she graduated. He specifically emphasized one clause: anyone who challenges or attempts to reverse this will would forfeit their inheritance entirely. When the video ended, no one spoke for a long time. Finally, Thomas exploded. "This is a setup. He wasn't in his right mind. It's him. He's the one who orchestrated this." He forced him. I didn't react. I didn't need to. The evidence spoke for itself. Mr. Chen opened a USB drive, a video from a hidden camera in my father's house. They, Thomas and Beckett, were recorded forcing my father to sign a stack of papers while he was barely conscious. Beckett guided my father's hand to the pen while Thomas read each line in a coercive tone. Neither of them knew the camera was recording everything. The silence after the video ended was suffocating. Jennifer, Thomas's wife, broke into tears. "Oh my God, Thomas, what have you done?" Beckett sat motionless, his face pale. Thomas stood up and slammed his fist on the table. "You'll pay for this," he shouted. "I swear, I think it's you who should be worried about that." Mr. Chen replied, his voice calm yet heavy with meaning. "You have the right to challenge the will, but as Mr. George stipulated, your entire share will be revoked if you do so. And based on this video, I don't think the court will be on your side." Thomas stormed out. Beckett followed without saying a word. My two cousins silently lowered their heads, too afraid to look me in the eye. When the door closed behind them, I leaned back in my chair, feeling like the weight of an entire family had just lifted from my shoulders. Diego gave my shoulder a light pat. Aurora took my hand, holding it tightly. Maureen had tears in her eyes, but they were tears of relief. A few days later, I officially moved into my father's house. Maureen stayed in the guest house just as he had wanted. We spent the whole afternoon cleaning and organizing everything. I hung the photo of my father back on the wall where he used to keep it, in the living room facing the garden he loved so much. Work at the company started, and it hasn't been easy. Some board members were hesitant, cautious, but when I presented the development plan my father had sketched out, they fully supported it, maybe because they saw a part of him in me. I also met with Kendra, handed her the letter from my father, and confirmed the scholarship he set up for her. She broke down in tears, hugged me, a genuine gesture I couldn't refuse. Thomas and Beckett, from what I know, are under preliminary investigation for fraud and coercion, forcing a dying man to sign documents. I don't take pleasure in it, I just feel like it's justice. One evening, as I sat at my father's desk, the sunset casting golden light through the room, I reopened his journal. There was one line he wrote that I'll never forget. "If you're reading this, it means you've lived up to what I believed in. You're strong, you're fair, and you don't let anyone trample the truth." I gently closed the journal, raised my eyes to the garden, where the wind was gently swaying the branches he had planted. My father is gone, but he left me not just a material legacy, but the greatest lesson in loyalty, resilience, and justice. This story may not have a perfect ending, but it's the truth, and to me, the truth is the most valuable gift he ever gave me. If you've followed this far, thank you for joining me on this journey. If you have any thoughts, feel free to leave a comment below. Don't forget to share the video if you think this story has value, and subscribe to the channel to continue joining me for more emotional stories. I'll see you in the next chapter of this journey.